Okay, good afternoon. Welcome. Picking up in the topic of In God We Trust, learning Shaar Habitachon, the treatise on trusting God, written by Rabbeinu Bachya. We left off last week discussing some of the benefits of Bitachon in terms of one's spirituality, one's observance, one's ability to do the right thing as a result of having bitachon. And the last thing we talked about was that when one realizes that their sustenance and their paycheck ultimately comes from God and not from their boss, and their security comes from God and not from those around them, meaning ultimately he who we have to rely on is only God. God is the one who controls the results of any events. Whatever ends up happening is only within God's will. So therefore, that can affect the way we relate to people. And in particular, when it comes to our livelihood, we realize I don't have to step over the line and do the wrong thing in order to make sure that I earn a living, or that I have security, because ultimately that's in God's hands. So that was what we talked about last. The Chovos HaLevavos goes on and he discusses further benefits in terms of our service of God. And so if you have the source sheet, great. Otherwise, you can just listen in. So source number one, continuing in his introduction, he says that another benefit of bitachon, of trusting God, is the trusting God will lead one to empty his mind from the distractions of the world and to focus his heart to matters of service of God. So this I mentioned earlier a couple classes ago, but since he actually says it, I thought we should just see that it's said straight out in the Chovos HaLevavos. And this is very important. If a person is constantly worrying about everything, then it's very hard to live. And it's certainly difficult to live in the way that God hopes us to live, and to be able to focus ourselves on what is actually important in our service of God, in our relationship with God, to be able to focus on what needs to be done, what is my mission, what should I be doing. But rather, if a person spends their life worrying about other things, or where their protection will come from, where their sustenance will come from, and whatever else a person might be worrying about, so it becomes more difficult to focus on what matters most. And so a person who has bitachon, who trusts in God, relies on God, and they develop that menuchas hanefesh that we've been talking about, that serenity, that sense of security, so then they can focus on what needs to be focused on. Again, everybody has their own situation of why they're worrying, why they're anxious. Some of it, could be more chemical and psychological, less, meaning I'm not suggesting that bitachon is the answer to everybody's anxiety. They may, need other interventions, that their Hishtadlus, the efforts that they may need to make may involve other interventions. But in many situations, it is a great intervention, bitachon, and it's really about our frame of mind and our perspective. And if we can develop a perspective of bitachon, it can help us very much in this area. And if we help ourselves in this area and we don't worry and we don't spend our whole time thinking about how will I live or how will I survive, or these types of things, so then we can focus on what's important. So that's another benefit. He continues, and that's the next source, and he says, among the benefits of trusting in God regarding religious matters, so again, in the Hebrew calls this be'inyan haTorah, so regarding spiritual matters, here's another benefit. One who trusts in God, if he has wealth, will be quick to fulfill his monetary obligations to God and to men with a willing and generous spirit. So, being fulfilling God's commandments can sometimes be expensive. right? There's a cost of living a Jewish life, and there are many costs involved, and a person may be concerned about this and may say it's very expensive and I can't do it. And they may try to do it, but at a more maybe find sort of the cheaper way out. So for example, we have a mitzvah to put mezuzahs on our doors. Now you could get a mezuzah for $25, $30, and by mezuzah I don't mean the case, I mean the scroll that goes inside, because that's the mezuzah, that's the important part. You could get a mezuzah for $25 or $30, and if it's that price, it probably means that it was written by a sofer who is not as talented at writing a very nice mezuzah. It may be a smaller scroll, maybe small, there's different reasons why they have different prices, but it's likely not as nice of a mezuzah. Or a person could spend a little bit more. They could spend $60 on a mezuzah or $90 on a mezuzah, and that would be what we call hider mitzvah, doing a mitzvah in the most beautiful way. And mezuzah is just one example, but I think it's a good example when it comes to this topic of bitachon and relying on God. Right? People spend a lot of money to decorate their homes in a beautiful way with beautiful furniture, etc. But yet, when it comes to buying their mezuzahs, they are, we don't spend as much often, and why not? So could be we just don't realize that there's different levels of mezuzahs that we could get, and having a beautiful mezuzah is a good and important thing. But also, that's just an example. In general, with spending money on mitzvos and beautifying our fulfillment of mitzvos, we may be hesitant. I don't know, it's an extra few dollars. I might need that money tomorrow for something else. And that plays into the question of bitachon, of knowing that Hashem will care for us. So we're not suggesting that a person who has, can't afford to put food on their table, that they start spending a lot of money on their lulav and esrog or on their mezuzah when they really can't afford it, because that would not necessarily be the correct thing to do. But if somebody really could afford it, they're just concerned, I don't know, I might later need that money for something else. I'm saving it up. So bitachon says to fulfill, trust in God. God will care for you. You do his mitzvos in the best way, and leave the rest up to God. Whatever, God will make sure that a person has what they need. Certainly with tuition, that comes up for families. Some families, it's a given they're going to send to a Jewish school and pay whatever tuition they have to or can. Some are on the fence, and they're not sure because it's expensive. So maybe I'll send to public school and I'll educate my kids. But bitachon says that do what's the right thing to do. And it's true. It's a big expense. It's tremendous expense. And it's difficult to do it. But if a person has bitachon, then it's less difficult. A person says that this is everything that I have it comes from God. And God has provided me with what I need and what I need to fulfill his commandments. And so someone who has trust in God will not hesitate to use their money towards fulfilling the will of God. Jill.
Aren't you saying this in this example in sort of a, so to speak, black and white manner? I mean, bitachon isn't like an all or nothing thing instantaneously. It's like over time, right?
Sure.
So for the school example, somebody might start off saying, I don't have the money, I can't afford it. And then as they go along, if their bitachon develops or whatever, and they start, gradually, like, okay, the second child will start or the third child will start, something like that.
Absolutely. But I mean, yeah, bitachon is certain. What he is enumerating is when a person develops bitachon, what benefits it has in terms of their spiritual endeavors. So certainly everybody's in a different place. But this is a benefit of bitachon for anybody, right? Having bitachon has a spiritual benefit. This is the benefit. The benefit is that it allows us to spend we won't hesitate. We'll be quick, in his language, quick to fulfill our monetary obligations to God. One more important one to mention is tzedakah, is charity, right? So people give different amounts of tzedakah. Well, everybody gives a different amount and a different percentage, and there's and has a different way that they calculate how much they should give and how much they can afford to give. And again, everybody's different, but some people are very worried, if I give too much, what am I going to have for tomorrow or for 20 years from now or for retirement or etc. And so Bitachon says that, I'm not saying everybody should give away all their money, but Bitachon would say, I mean, he might say that, but I'm not ready to say that. I'm not, I can't get up here and say that, but Bitachon will help us. Bitachon will help us be able to give, to be more giving, to give more. Bitachon will help us realize that Hashem provides, and I'll trust in him, I'll do his will, and he will make sure that I have what I need. Okay, then he continues, and he says that if he does not have wealth, he will consider that lack of wealth to be among the favors of God to him, because he is exempt from the monetary obligations to God and men, which wealth brings. So this is interesting. He flips it now. Let's say I don't have any money. So Bitachon says to be happy about that, because if I do have money, so then, like we said, it's hard to give it away, right? It's hard to use it properly. And so a person who has money has to be concerned, maybe I'm not meeting my obligation to give as I should. Maybe I'm not fulfilling what God expects from me. And so even if I have bitachon, I have faith in God, but that doesn't mean I have faith in myself that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So to have money actually comes with a great responsibility to be able to give it out in the proper manner. Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon writes that he once went with the stipler. The stipler was Rav Yisrael Yaakov or Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, the late Reb Chaim Kanievsky's father, and he went with a wealthy man to the stipler, and the stipler mentioned to Rabbi Solomon that I feel very fortunate that I'm not rich. He said, because if I was rich, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I would always be worrying about who should I give my money to? Am I really meeting my obligation? Giving enough? Am I really fulfilling my obligation? And so what the Chobos Halavavos is saying is that if we don't have as much, so that actually can help us have menuchas hanefesh, have a certain a greater level of serenity. A person who usually we tend to think, if I'm rich, so then I'll be secure, and then I'll have tranquility and serenity. But he's suggesting that at least in this regard, it's the opposite. If I have a lot of money, then I have a lot of responsibility. I always have to be concerned, am I fulfilling that responsibility? If I don't, so then it's not as much of a concern. So this is the explanation that Rabbi Solomon gave for this little paragraph. I was not so sure I understand it, because I think that no matter how much money a person has, they have to be concerned about this. It's not only a wealthy person. I guess there's just degrees of it, but no matter how wealthy a person is, unless they have nothing, and maybe that's what he's talking about. If a person really can't afford to give anything away, so then they don't have to worry about this. Maybe that's what he's referring to. But so he's saying if a person does not have not just wealth, he doesn't have anything, so that could be viewed as a good thing because now I don't have responsibilities. But once a person has some means, so then they have these responsibilities, and it becomes a challenge to meet those responsibilities. So there's a perspective a person who has bitachon can gain, which is that or a way to, maybe it's almost a way to have bitachon. When a person has nothing, so they say, first of all, I know that this was God's, this is God's will for me, and I can understand even how it's good for me because now I have a sense of serenity, not having to figure out where my money is supposed to go. Okay, then he continues. Another advantage of not having wealth is he is spared from the mental distraction of protecting and managing it. So this we also already talked about, I think, a bit last week. But the more that someone has, so the more they are concerned about managing that wealth. This is what our sages referred to in saying, the more possessions, the more worry, right? Marbe nechasim, marbe daga. The more possessions a person has, the more one has to worry about. A person lives in a small apartment, there's minimal repairs, minimal responsibility. Person then goes and buys a house, so there's new responsibilities. They buy a bigger house, there's even more responsibility, there's more to clean, there's a bigger property to care for. Person owns multiple properties, now there's a lot to deal with. So there's a lot, and that could be very distracting for a person. But somebody who does not have wealth, so they don't have that mental distraction. And then he says, and they said, who is wealthy, he who is content with what he has, right? Ezehu ashir hasamech bechelko, who is happy, one who is happy with what they have. And that really is achieved by a sense of bitachon, of knowing that whatever I have, whether large or small, that's the share that God has allotted for me. If I believe that the possessions that I've attained, the wealth that I've acquired is because of me, because of my great talents and my intelligence and my all that I've put in, and that's why I achieved wealth. It was a result of me. So then that person will never be content, because that means I could get more. I could keep going. If I got this much because of me, then I could get more because of me. So I won't be content. Person's never content on their own. Person who has, the sages say, a person has 100, they want 200. So that's all true if I believe that what I have acquired is because of my own talents and my own efforts. However, if a person recognizes that whatever I've acquired is because God decided that should be my lot, it's true, I may have put in efforts, but who says those efforts would bear fruit? A lot of people try a lot of things that don't work out, and two people might even try the same thing, and for one of them it will work out, and for one of them it won't. It's all in God's hands whether a person achieves financial success or not. And so a person who recognizes that is able to be happy with their share. This is my share. It's literally, if you take the words literally, right? Who is happy? One is happy with his lot, his share. Samech bichelko, with his share, meaning he recognizes this is my share. This is what God has chosen for me. So then of course I'm happy with it. I can't even get more if I would try. This is what God has allotted for me. And so such a person can live with a sense of tranquility, because I know that I can't even get more if I tried. But a person who thinks that they're in control and and what they acquired was due to their own genius and, choices and whatever it might be, talents, so then that person won't stop. That person will keep going. They won't ever be sameach bechelko. They won't ever be happy with what they have, because they'll know, or they'll think that it's possible for them to achieve more.
Can you apply that lesson to learning? You're applying it to financial, but how about learning? One would think all the same words apply to learning.
It's an interesting question. Would we say that a person's success in, let's say, acquiring Torah knowledge comes from, is also in the hands of Hashem, and I just put in effort, and whether it bears fruit or not is all in God's hands? It's an interesting question. We do find such a concept when it came to Moshe, when the Midrash or the Gemara, I don't remember, talks about when God was teaching Moshe the Torah. So Moshe kept trying to understand it, and then he couldn't understand it, and ultimately God gave it as a gift. He kind of gave it to him. But on the other hand, we will again eventually learn about it, but it's a good question. When it comes to mitzvos in general, putting Torah aside for a moment, when it comes to mitzvos in general, so we have an idea that that it's in our hands whether to do a mitzvah or not. We have free will, and it's all in our hands. Now, whether our attempt to do a mitzvah will be successful or not, again, like anything else, if I remember correctly, he's going to talk about that later, and I think he's going to say the same thing, that the results are not in our hands, the results are ultimately in God's hands. So when it comes to Torah study, it would seem that we might say the same thing, that a person can put in the effort, whether those results bear fruit will be in God's hands. I think that we can apply the same thing. When we get to that section, which may not be for a while, but about mitzvah performance, then we can try to revisit that. Okay. He continues. So we're still in the first page of the sources, source number 2. We're still in the introduction to Shaar Habitachon. I do hope to get out of the introduction in today's class. We're not seeing every word that he writes. So he continues and he says, another benefit, this is the 4th paragraph, another benefit, one who trusts in God will not diminish his trust on account of having much wealth, because he does not rely on the money. He regards it as a deposit, which he is ordered to use in specific ways for specific matters and for a limited time. So this is an idea that may be familiar to you. It's spoken out here by a very early source, Chovos HaLevavos, that we are to view the money that God gives us, the possession that God gives us, as a deposit, something that we're entrusted to watch over, to care for it, and to do with it as we're supposed to do, which means to use it for our needs, our survival, and the rest to use towards fulfilling God's will, to give to others, to fulfill mitzvos in whatever various ways, and that's how we're to view all that God gives us, as a deposit. It's not really ours. It's ultimately everything belongs to God. He's given this over for us to guard and watch over, and to do what we're supposed to do with it. Now, he has a very interesting line here. He's, again, reading this paragraph more carefully. Another benefit, one who trusts in God will not diminish his trust on account of having much wealth, because he does not rely on the money. So we're talking about a person who has bitachon. So a person has bitachon, and then guess what? God gives them a boon of wealth. They hit it big, and now they're very wealthy. So I understand up until when I have nothing, then I need to rely on God. I don't have anything else to rely on. Now I'm rich. I have millions of dollars in the bank. I own blocks and blocks of real estate. So I don't need to rely on God anymore. I have all this real estate that I can rely on. It's constant. It's guaranteed income. So that could happen to someone, right? So he says that no, someone who has trust in God will not diminish his trust on account of having much wealth, because he does not rely on the money. He realizes that his wealth is not the source of, or he again, I guess he goes on to say he regards it as a deposit. He realizes this is not even mine. This really ties back to what we talked about last week about I'm forgetting where I was about to go with that. That the security of a person, right? We talked about how the Brisker Rav had said, he had owned real estate and then he lost it, and he said ultimately what is blocks and blocks of real estate? I'm not living there, right? So it's security for me. It's backup, and bitachon can give a person that same sense of security. But the Brisker Rav, actually, Rabbi Soloveitchik, has another related insight that I thought was very powerful and really comes back to the same or very similar point. We read in Tehillim, in Psalms, this is on the first page also, Kaveh Hashem, chazak v'yametz libecha v'kaveh Hashem. Hope to Hashem, strengthen yourself, and then yametz libecha, he will give you courage, he will strengthen you, v'kaveh Hashem, and hope to Hashem. So, it's an interesting verse, right? So what's the result if I hope to Hashem and he gives me strength? So, I strengthen myself, so then he'll give me strength and hope to Hashem. I might expect, and we do have verses like this that say, hope to Hashem and he'll provide for you, right? It sounds, he'll make you rich. It sounds like from this verse, the reward for hoping to Hashem is that you'll be able to hope to Hashem more. So why is that? And I'd rather hope to Hashem and then get blocks and blocks of real estate, right? I don't want to be rewarded by hoping to Hashem more. So Rabbi Soloveitchik explains, this is quoted in the Art Scroll, Chovos Halavavos on page 29, for those who have it. So he says that we have learned that the more a person places their reliance on Hashem, the more that Hashem will providentially address that person's needs. So we talked about, right, that person has bitachon, they are privy to, or they're given a higher level of providence, of hashgacha pratis, of individual help from God, as opposed to if they don't have bitachon, then God says, okay, you're kind of on your own. You won't get special intervention. So person gets a special amount of providence, and that way God really ensures that they're not lacking. Now, like we said, theoretically, a person could be rewarded for their bitachon with a more secure source of income, like blocks of real estate or something like that. But what the Chovos Halavavos really develops, and a little bit in the section that we skipped, where he compares he has a whole section where he compares the person who has bitachon to an alchemist. An alchemist, someone who can turn metals into gold or silver. And And so it's like a guaranteed income, but it comes with many, many downsides. And all those downsides don't apply to one who has bitachon. Some of those downsides are relevant even for a person who owns a lot of real estate or has other guaranteed income, which can, it's guaranteed as long as it's guaranteed until there's a crash of some sort. Or even a person can have real estate and have a lot of money coming in. They could be prevented from accessing that money that they have, right? That's not going to help them. So, but a person who has bitachon, person who relies on God, they're taken care of in any situation. So the very best guarantee of steady income, of continued sustenance is bitachon itself. If a person is rewarded with some other source of income, that actually could diminish their bitachon. Like what they said, they might come and say, I don't need God anymore. I already have I have a good job. So what do I need God for? But so Hashem doesn't reward the person who has bitachon with steady income. Hashem rewards the person with more bitachon by strengthening that person's bitachon and instilling in them the courage to attain a greater level of bitachon, which causes that person to be even more worthy of Hashem's providence. And so that is a continuing cycle where a person has bitachon, Hashem rewards that person with special providence, and also continues to reward them with the ability to have more bitachon. That's how the Brisker Rav Soloveitchik explained this. Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik explained this verse. Kaveh al Hashem chazak, hope to Hashem, strengthen yourself, and then v'ametz libecha, then God will strengthen you. V'kaveh al Hashem, and strengthen you to hope to Him more, because that's the best way to keep gaining, to keep being guaranteed the sustenance and the special providence, is to continue to hope to Hashem. So over here in the paragraph that we were just reading in the Chovos HaLevavos, so another benefit, one who trusts in God will not diminish his trust on account of having much wealth, because he does not rely on the money. One who's relying on their money, so there's no guarantees. And that can all, like we previously spoke about, that person, you just never know. And as opposed to one who is relying on God and realizing that everything is ultimately in God's hands, so then they continue to receive the special providence. So a result over here, he's just saying that one, a person of a proper level of bitachon, when they do get that windfall and they do see that they're achieving financial success, it's so important for them not to get caught up in that and to lose track of where everything really comes from, and then they could continue to enjoy that special providence. He continues and he says, and if he stays wealthy for a long time, so let's say God provides him great financial success, a person who has bitachon will not become arrogant due to his wealth. And in the Hebrew, it's a lo yivat bavuro, literally like he won't kick. And it's a reference to a verse in Parshas Ekev, I think it is, that says that when the Jewish people come to Israel and they live off the land and they become wealthy, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. So they'll actually, that verse may be somewhere else, but that maybe in Hazinu. Anyways, wherever that verse is, there's a different verse in Ekev. But the idea is that a person's wealth can cause them to kick back and say, I don't need God anymore. But a person who has bitachon and recognizes that whatever they have comes from God will not do that. He will not remind the poor person of his charity gifts, since he was commanded to give to him. We realize that what we have is a deposit from God. It's meant to be given out to others. So we won't hold ourselves high over those that we're giving to. Person thinks that it's my money and I'm giving you my money, so you have to, thank me profusely for giving to you. But that's not a way to give tzedakah, and it's just not the case, he's saying. A person who has bitachon realizes whatever we have is a deposit from God, and that will teach them that then they'll give tzedakah in the proper way, not expecting profuse thanks and respect from the recipient, and as he goes on, he will not seek his gratitude and praises. Rather, he will thank his creator, appointing him as a means for doing good to the poor person. So on the contrary, we will be thankful that we have the opportunity to be the one to be really God's treasurer in a certain way, to give out, right? Why did God give me more than I need? He's entrusting me to provide for others, and that's a tremendous honor, and that's the perspective of someone who realizes that their sustenance comes from God and is given to them as a deposit, really, to use what they need and then to use the rest for doing good for others and for mitzvah performance. Okay. Fine. So that is as much as I want to see from the introduction. These are some of the benefits, spiritual benefits of having bitachon. He does go on to talk about material benefits. I think that they're best saved for when we talk more about Hishtadlus and what the effort of a person is, what effort is expected from us. And then, because much of the benefit is from realizing that I don't have to kill myself in life to, I have to put in a certain amount of effort, but I don't have to travel to the ends of the earth to earn my livelihood. God will provide. That's a lot of the material benefit just comes from living, with confidence and security that God will provide. And I just have to do what I have to do, but I don't have to, again, go to the ends of the earth. And that's some of the material benefits. So when we talk more about Hishtadlus and the effort a person has to have, I think those ideas will come to light and will be maybe even self-understood. What I want to do in the last few minutes is start chapter 1, where he begins to define bitachon. And it's interesting the way that it starts. He first wants to define what bitachon is, what trust means, but not necessarily trusting God. Just in general, what does it mean to rely on someone? And so he speaks about it abstractly and not specifically about God, and then goes to show that based on everything that I've showed you, we should have tremendous reliance on God. So turning to page 2 of the sources, if you have it. So he begins chapter 1 as follows. Trust is mahus habitachon. What is the definition? Or maybe what is the picture of someone with bitachon, someone who's relying, again, not necessarily on God, just reliance in general. It's menuchas hanefesh habotech. It's the peace of the mind of one who trusts. So that we've alluded to already a few times. It's the sense of serenity, this peace of mind. And it comes from that one relies in his heart that the one he trusts in will do what is good and proper for him. So if I trust, what it means to rely on you, for me to rely on you means that I trust that you will do what's good and proper in whatever manner it is that relates to whatever matter it is that I'm trusting you in, according to his ability and his understanding of what will further his good. And that is already, maybe leading us to why there's a major difference between relying on a person and relying on God, because the level of reliance that we can have is only according to the person's ability of what they can do for us and their understanding of what is good for me. So I can rely on you, but it's limited. Any human being is limited in what they can do and their abilities, and they're also limited in understanding what's really good for the other person. But that's what that's what my level of trust is dependent on. That my feeling of serenity, my feeling of calmness really is dependent on how much I trust that person, that they can do what it is that I want, that I'm relying on them for, and that they will understand what is truly best for me. And then he says, but the main factor which leads one to trust in the one trusting, and without which trust cannot exist, is for one's heart to be confident that the one trusted will keep his word and will do what he pledged. So besides for that, the one I'm trusting in has the ability to do it and knows what's best for me, but are they going to do it, right? So I will only really trust in someone who I believe will keep their word and will do what's good for me, and do what they said they would do and more. And that he will also think to do what is good for him, even on what he did not pledge, out of pure generosity and kindness. That the one that I'm trusting in will do what's good for me, not only what they promised to do, but even go beyond. That's the person that I really would want to trust in. And so it's someone who has the ability to do what I want them to do, or I should say, has the ability to do what's good for me, understands what's good for me, can be trusted to keep their word, that they'll do what they pledged to do, and will also go beyond what they pledged. And that's the first step of just defining what it means to rely on anyone. Who should I choose to rely on? I mean, now you can, knowing that, thinking about that, you can choose now who you would want to rely on based on that. But he's going to go through in further detail all these points, and we'll see how it's clear who we should be relying on. I guess for next time I didn't get to it, but I want to also get to source number 5. It's a very famous and very important paragraph that the Chazon Ish writes about Bitachon, and it's something that we're just going to have to keep in mind. Just very basically, outside, Chazon Ish has a famous idea that Bitachon has nothing to do with hoping that God will do what's good. It's a sense of, or God will do what I think is good, but it's a sense of knowing that God, that everything that happens comes from God. And, with that, so we'll read through it carefully, and it's something that we're going to have to keep in mind throughout our study. Is he disagreeing with the Chovos HaLevavos? Is it in line with the Chovos HaLevavos? My feeling is that he's not disagreeing. I don't think he would disagree with the Chovos HaLevavos. And that'll be something further to explore. Okay, thank you for joining.
Thank you very much.